Hello and welcome to this video on lean operations and principles. This is the first video of the course BC3405 on lean operations and analytics conducted in Nanyang Business School and TU. In this course, we want to talk about these three words, uh, lean operations and principles. So that's three words, and each word has quite a bit of weight underneath it. Lean, of course, we want to talk about what is lean, what do practitioners and professionals in the industry uh, think about when they say lean, and what benefits has it got to bring to us that we really want to use it, practice it. And then there is operations, which of course already has a lot of studies and research done on them. And of course, combining them together, there will be a lot more questions: how, why, and how to make it better, and so on. And of course, there's this word principles, right? So principles is more a academic word to sound right. The logic, the structure, the driving principle, the driving uh, logic behind them, the formulas, if any, right? So our focus mainly is on the thinking part, the why part, right? The why part and the how part, maybe, right? And of course, it's contrastingly, it's not about calculations. It's not about intensive accuracy on calculating data and all that. There are calculations, there are numbers that we got to deal with because we have to find numerical support. But the focus of this course and this today's video is mainly on exposing ourselves, right, to how these three words uh, interact with the way factories manufacture stuff and how it affects the business itself, the viability, the sustainability, and so on. So here on the top left, you see quite a number of bullet points, essentially discussing the various areas and aspects of uh, lean operations. And of course, the big word that you see, right, clearly is the word waste, and that is one word that we'll point at when we say lean, right? What is lean? Well, lean is not equal to waste, but we look out for waste, and already you can see that that sounds a little bit different, right? Because we keep talking about having higher productivity, having bigger capacity, doing manufacturing at scale so that we can reduce variable costs and so on and so forth. But no one has been telling us that you have to look at waste, right? And that's where lean operations come in, right? So the word lean is no fat, right? No fat. And what is the so-called fat in operations? And that word is essentially waste. So if you're very keen in reducing fat, in reducing weight, right, because of fat, then it's kind of the same idea, right? That factories want to slim down and not carry so much fat by reducing, of course, not fat, but waste, right? So that's why this is one big word that I want you to be fully impacted by, right? That it registers in your mind right away that in lean, we are looking for waste. We are looking for places where wastes are being generated. And sometimes the wastes that are being generated from the lean operations perspective, it is not necessarily visible. For example, time loss is a waste. Yeah, we'll talk more about that. But I'm just giving you an example that time loss cannot be recovered and you don't see it. And that is the problem, right? Because when we don't see it, we squander it rather easily, right? So if you don't plan your schedule, for example, then you tend to realize that, hey, today has gone, right? It's time for dinner. Well, where was my day? What did I do, right? So you need to be aware of the sources of waste. And here in this bottom icon, I try of the many sources of waste and in various different industries, I try to put them in three categories. Starting with heaven, right? That basically means accidental, unplanned, unexpected, due to serendipity, randomness, uh, due to heaven, right? So due to unplanned situations, somehow you encountered that situation and waste is generated. For example, machine jamming. When machine jams, of course, that particular piece of raw material, whatever you're making, right? Maybe we're making a tin of sardines, and the final, the can sealing machine, uh, unexpectedly jammed, right? And so that particular tin kind of is half done, so you have to discard it, and that's waste. And so, uh, what's the big idea? The big idea is that this category of waste will always be there, right? So number one is don't think of eliminating it. To talk about having zero accidental waste is not sounding very right. It probably will work in a big boardroom showdown. Sounds good, sounds nice, but academically, statistically, if you calculate, you will know that Murphy's law, right? It will just happen. So we can talk about 99.99999% reliable, or productive, or uh, non-waste producing, but you cannot say it is 100%. So that's the kind of nature and the source. The next one is, of course, human generated, right? And by that, I don't mean having a bad guy in the factory purposely destroying things. That's criminal, right? That's not what I'm talking about here. When we say human generated, human sources of waste. By human, I mean, in a way, systematically, waste is being generated. Why? Well, perhaps due to human written policies, right? For example, company is too stringent. They have a very restrictive overtime work policy due to saving costs, right? So that's good and well, but they didn't know that they are producing food, and the raw material that is being bought, if you don't have overtime to quickly clear those big amounts of raw materials, like maybe fish or grinded powder or whatnot, that is being purchased by the purchasing department. One hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing, and then those raw materials expire, cannot be used anymore, and that's a huge loss to the company, and that's waste, right? Yeah. So and that can be eliminated, and that is kind of such a pity that you have one department doing its own good thing, reduce cost, reduce overtime, and another department suffering, right? And that is the systematic kind of generation of waste that is so undeserved, right? That is so uh, heartache, for the CEO to see that, oh, what are we doing here, right? We need to do more. So that is just one example, right? That is of very different nature from what I call the heaven generated kind of waste. And the third, about humus, like from the ground, right? It's more like anything that is generated, waste that is being generated due to the physics nature of things. Now, of course, we are living in a physics governed world, and in some sense, both the heavenly generated waste and the human generated waste, they're also part of governed by physics, right? But I think I group them separately. Why? Because uh, that's the kind of waste, for example, that is being generated by, let's say, a delivery truck, right? A delivery truck can generate waste, right? Due to its proper operations, because you need to fuel, you need to pay the driver the cost, but we don't call that waste because you've got to pay the driver because the truck has to move and it has to generate carbon dioxide and emissions. Yeah, that is waste, but you kind of have to have that, isn't it? But what I'm talking about is, for example, that this truck is being exploited, right? So it is like 15-year-old, and it is continuously, being used so that the mileage is dropping like crazy. It is, although it's trying to be, it's being well maintained, the mileage, the engine, the overall parts are just having more and more friction, right? So that its mileage is not really very, very good. And the company, right, is trying to uh, not try to expand at this time of uncertainty, right? So they continue to push the truck, and the truck will just, of course, grudgingly produce more waste. And the kind of fuel that is being put in is not going to give them extra mileage. And so this is pure physics, right? Old machines, they will not be able to be as efficient as modern engines and modern models if the company were to be able to invest and in a new fleet of trucks. And so that is the kind of waste we're talking about. So should the, well, of course, the whether to renew the fleet of trucks or not, or to live with the present, but to send them for uh, rather intensive upgrading of parts, right, to make it somewhat more efficient. Maybe not as efficient as new ones, new engines, but somewhat significantly more efficient than the current old machine that is not being well maintained, right? So that would be the kind of waste due to humans, the pure physics of things that we cannot get away from, but we can try to find ways to improve and reduce the waste that's generated. Is that okay? All right. So that's the three sources of waste production that we will want to look at and be aware of. Now, on the right, there is this operations, and of course, this is too simplistic, but having thousands of details might not be very useful either, right? So here we are just talking about, in short, what is operations? In short, personally, to me, operations means living and breathing 24/7 by 365. That's it, right? The fact that you are sitting here in front of the screen, watching this video comfortably, absorbing knowledge, is a testament to your successful running of your living operations. So long as you're alive, you are running a living live operations to keep yourself alive and of course prosper and grow. So that's your live operations. So during your live operations, what you do, you eat, right, to sustain yourself, you sleep, you exercise, you study to grow yourself, right? So that's the top part, the process, right? And of course, you need to grow yourself so that you can have the mental capacity to absorb more complex knowledge, to absorb more amounts of knowledge, and that's your building of capacity, right? Your abilities. And of course, there is always your accumulation of wealth, your accumulation of knowledge, your accumulation of skills. That's an inventory of these things. So inventory doesn't just have to be physical, 1 box, 2 box, 3 boxes. It can be your number of skills as you write down in your CV, right? Just try to recall when you are in secondary schools, your CV probably, I know how to play badminton, right? I know how to do calculus. But right now, you can even add more. I know lean operations, right? So you keep piling up, adding more skills, knowledge, right, into your CV, and that's your inventory of skills and knowledge. And of course, you run operations to improve the quality of your life. You can be eating rice and vegetable and pork, but you want to eat lobster, you want to eat sashimi, right? So you have to then improve on that, on your quality, and that's quality of life. So if you're looking at life operations, that's what I try to paint to you. That encompasses, this picture basically describes the different angles and aspects you might not be aware because your mind is so fully integrated Your mind is the factory running these operations. So integrated that you just carry them out. Why do you do that? You don't know, right? You just do it because you know it's good for you. And that is trying to, or rather this icon, this picture, is trying to kind of make the subconscious more conscious, or the make the invisible more visible in a real factory settings. So in a real factory settings, operations will encompass the 24/7/365 smooth operations, smooth carrying out of scheduled activities in a way that doesn't produce waste, right? And there will be processes, for example, scheduled production, which worker supervised by which supervisor, running on which machine, taking raw materials from which warehouse, from which lot, right? And to run from when to when, which shift, using what tools and machines. So that's the process, usually involving scheduling and personnel and various other resources. So that's very, very important aspect, process, right? And then of course capacity, right? Capacity, how capable are we? In factory production, say manufacturing of goods, usually that would mean the number of items per hour or per day or per year. Okay, so capacity might sound like just a number, but from the business perspective, I can tell you this number is the most important number when you are talking about supply chain kind of cooperation. Example, when Apple speaks to Foxconn, everyone knows, right? The Foxconn is actually making the iPhones for Apple. The first number that Apple speaks with Foxconn is not how expensive are you in making my next generation of iPhone 27. They're now at what, iPhone 16, right? So I'm just giving a virtual example. So I have this iPhone 27 blueprint, right? The first question Apple asks the supplier Foxconn is not how expensive are you to make this blueprint, but rather, can you make it? What capacity do you? I need 50 millions because I anticipate great demand for this completely AI driven iPhone 27, right? So can you make 50 million per year? Do you have the capacity? That's the biggest discussion, the most critical business discussion. Because if you cannot have the capacity that Apple wants, whether you are dirt cheap or very expensive, whether you have high quality, low quality, not very interested, right? Because when Apple launches, there'll be great demand, right? Because Apple is very skilled at doing all these things. And when there'll be great demand and you cannot produce, of course, sometimes Apple might, at the backstage create a managed out of stock situation. That means they actually have stock, but they say, oh, we have some problem here, problem there. Why don't you just, lock in your orders first, right? And just to show some very strong demand. Not to say that Apple is fabricating the demand, but if you kind of manage it well, it can amplify in the sense that, wow, this is such a popular thing, I better get one, right? So Apple is taking advantage of that. But when you actually cannot deliver, because Foxconn can only make 20 million sets a year for iPhone 27, and Apple wants 50 million, then we have a very serious problem, right? Then we have a very serious problem. So yes, capacity is just a number, right? But it is a very, very important business negotiating parameter, right? So it is important to develop capacity. So if you are Foxconn, I mean, it's easy to think you're Apple, right? But if you're Foxconn, if you are the supplier, you want to watch this, because if Confox, the closest competing supplier, wants to eat Foxconn alive and snatch and wants to snatch this deal from Foxconn, they will build up a capacity of 60, 70 million sets per year and say, Apple, we charge 1 cent more expensive than Foxconn per set, right? However, we have 70 million sets capacity per year. Come with us. Foxconn will lose the deal because you just cannot cope with the volume right now. Yeah. So if you're Foxconn and you're aware of your next Confox competitor's capacity, what would you do? Of course, right? You want to build up the capacity. And that kind of thing will have to take time because we're talking about long supply chain kind of or long manufacturing cycle kind of situation, and you cannot have it overnight. You cannot, right? So, for example, now President Trump wants MAGA, right? Make America great again through having more manufacturers in America. Possible, possible, but it takes time, right? Because building up of capacity is not overnight. You cannot helicopter in the whole factory and expect it to work, because factory is a bit like our complicated organs in our body. It has to have a very right mix at the right time of factory, machines, raw material, people, right, of the right skill and talent. So it will take time. It's almost a bit organic in some sense. Organic as it takes, the cells gradually connect with each other to build bigger cells and and then eventually an organ to work in a very seamless and yet growing kind of situation. That it always balances. Like we grew up from baby until now, right? You look at our head, our skull. I'm always amazed that our skull is so hard, and yet it grew from a smaller skull since baby time till now, right? And how can we're not like crabs where we shed off the extra hardness of the old skull and then have a new one growing. We don't. It is just growing, right? So it has to take time to organically grow such that it is continuously functioning, producing, and yet scaling up at the same time. So it will take a lot of time, right? So, and of course, likely Trump knows it, and so he starts it right now so that he will be able to see, maybe not 100%, but perhaps 40%, 50% of those supply chains or industries that can be organically grown to scale in about 3-4 years time. Yeah, sure, why not? So semiconductor maybe, right? So that's the kind of situation we're talking about. Okay, next we want to talk about lean principles. And I'm not sure if you can see this part that my huge head is covering up. It says people, plants, parts. People, plants, parts, processes, and the right side is the finished goods, transportation. The outputs, input and output, right? So yeah, so like I just shared with you, a factory is like this blue box in the middle, right? So they convert raw materials, customers' demands, and products, right, into finished goods, transport them to the customers for distribution. But that's just a very simplified view, of course, right? But what are the principles that we are talking about? Customer focus. So when I highlight these words, customer focus, please pay attention to them. Okay, that means there'll be a lot of words trying to give you examples, describe them from another angle perspective. So too many words sometimes is diluting the attention and focus of the reader, right? But here, look at the focus words, the bold printed words. Customer focus. In other words, we just talked about lean being looking at waste. We also look at customer focus. Okay, so it's like a teacher telling you the lean principles. It's like a teacher telling you, hey, you have not been paying attention to your sleep. Oh, wow. I kept hearing teachers say you have to spend more time studying, but no teacher has told me to sleep more. And then suddenly this teacher comes along and say, you need to sleep more so that you will gain the kind of, uh, attention, right? And the necessary, you'll build up the necessary attention and memory power and whatnot, so that when you read once, you can remember well, understand, and move on. Right now, you are like half asleep. You end up not recalling what you do, and then you read 3 times. That's why you find reading so tough and you hate it. So says this teacher, for example. So lean principle comes along and says, hey, you have not been looking at your customer, right? You have been just thinking, I can make 100 items a day. So I buy the necessary raw materials. I produce as fast as I can, which is 100 items a day. My total cost to me is $1 per unit produced. So I'm going to charge my customer $1.20, giving me a 20% profit. See how clever am I, right? So that's one way of doing things, the usual way, right? Until this teacher comes along and says, hey, you have not been sleeping well, right? So, hey, you have not been looking at your customer. Have you asked your customer how much are they willing to pay? And then you say, why should I ask them? Because, when I make, they don't want, they don't buy. No wonder you are not selling. No wonder you are taking back a lot of your units, your produced goods back from your distributors. They say not selling, right? Have you asked yourself, what do your customers want? If they're only willing to pay 90 cents, why are you making a $1.20 unit? It's not affordable. I mean, at least even if they can afford, they are not willing to pay, right? So what do? Well, you can reduce the amount per unit, right? So instead of 100 grams per unit, you can reduce it to 80 grams per unit, right? So that your final cost is 60 cents, so you charge 80 cents or even 85 cents. Your profit increases, your customer is happy, and you don't lose money. Actually, your profit increases, right? And now your items are selling. And because it's selling, maybe it starts to dominate the market, and then you might become more cost efficient because you can now produce even more, right? So that's like one example story that I heard, right? So I haven't verified, but I think it's likely true. That when P&G went to India, for example, the initial um, those shampoo and stuff, right? The consumer goods that P&G sells, uh, they're sold at 300 milliliters kind of bottles, and the standard size, because that has always been the case for Europe, America, even uh, Southeast Asia customers. And so when they shipped over to India, they don't sell because for Indian market, the kind of customers, first of all, they might not be used to buying shampoo. And for that tier of customers who do use shampoo, they find it too big bottles, right? And maybe it's bulky, maybe it takes up too much of their household expenses to buy that bottle. So what should P&G do? What they do was to reduce the packaging size. So instead of selling 300 milliliters bottles, they sell much smaller quantity, like 100 milliliters bottles. And of course, if they had sold that bottle originally at X dollars, they now sell at X divided by 3 plus plus, right? Because uh, you are not going to just divide the price by a third. There will be extra cost a little bit, but then they can add a little bit more. The profit can increase without causing lots of pain to the customers. And now it starts to sell because customers can now afford them, find it useful. If I don't like this taste or this smell or this whatever it is, the quality or the fragrance or whatnot, well, I can always switch. And to the customer, it is quite easy for them to switch, right? So everybody is happy. Now, of course, every country or every uh, customer profile segments are different, right? So P&G knows it very well because they sell all over the world and they really have to interact with the local customers. So customer focus is one lesson, one thing that this teacher, our lean principles teacher, is telling us, right? So please pay attention to customer focus. Next, look at your process. So customer is external. You look outside. Please look outside. Please don't just look at yourself, right? Some factories, some management, they just look at yourself. They just look at themselves. Lean principle says, if you have been looking at outside too much, please look at yourself. Okay, once you know your customer focus, or while you're looking at customer focus, okay, you want to also look at, are you ready to cope with the customers? So back to the P&G example, their factories or their supplier chains, their suppliers have been configured to produce the 330 milliliters. All right, let's say if they reduce the packaging, just change the machine, that's true, but all through your supply chain, it has to also follow through. Or for example, the final boxing, one carton, the box will be smaller, right? So you have to, basically make sure the entire process is able to handle the smaller packaging. And then it's not just adjusting the pricing, it's about changing the whole process of the downstream process, right? So also at the same time, you want to highlight the non-value adding waste. Look at yourself. Look at yourself means look at your entire steps in the production's cycle. Look at all the steps. Are you generating waste? And now flipping back to the previous slide, and I'm not going to do that here because it's just very distracting. So if you remember the heaven, human, and humus, that at every step of your production process, are you forgetting that, right? There may be accidents here that can cause waste. What steps have you taken to minimize that, right? There may be policies and regulations and self-imposed company policies, right, that are contradicting each other, right? Not within this step, but step 3 and step 7, they are contradicting. And that's why step 3 took a lot of time to make certain angles or perspectives right, only for step 7 to remove that outcome, right? So that can be a problem. For example, just a artificial example. Step 3 may be printing a standard label in English, all right, explaining the ingredients of this shampoo and all that. Step 7, step 7 is created to localize that product to the Indian market, which, let's say, doesn't need the English, but must be in the, localized Tamil language. So step 7, overpaste and the label on top of the English label. So isn't that a waste? You have pasted a label in English only to be covered by another label. That is a waste. So did you identify all this, right? So humus, human, and then heaven. Re-engineer the process so that value-creating steps are implemented in a synchronized manner, without interruptions, detours, backflows, waiting, scrap, all these. Improve the flow, essentially, right? So that means make it smooth, smoothen it out. If there is non-smoothness, what do you think of? Who can you call? Waste, right? Waste, yes. So non-smoothness is waste. Can you imagine that? For example, you are now busy trying to write an essay about lean principle, right? So you try to think through, try to gather examples, only for your friend to call you on the phone, ring, ring, ring. Hello, hey, you want to have a game of chess? I'm busy now, sorry, right? Then you're back to work. 5 minutes later, ring, 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 same friend, right? Hey, you want to go for coffee or not? Sorry, please don't disturb me. I'm just trying to focus. Okay. 10 minutes later, ring, ring, ring. Hey, we are short of one for tennis. Would you want to come along? You can understand. Not smooth, right? Not smooth. So from 3 to 6, your friend keeps calling you. No doubt having been warned, but it's a good friend, so you cannot whatnot. So you just have to entertain. But from 3 to 6, for a good 3 hours, he would just call you on and off. I mean, the intention is good, right? But it is interrupting you, giving you non-smoothness. So in the end, when you look at your final product, probably, right, you're looking at a blinking cursor on a blank MS Word. You have created nothing. Possible, right? Because I've had that before, right? So if that happens to you, what more would it do to a business if it keeps getting interrupted? Okay, what more would it do to a production 24/7 production process if that process, no doubt machines, but then if that machine keeps getting interrupted, having to recover itself, then interrupted again, having to recover itself, will it be as productive as if it hadn't been interrupted at all and had it been able to just smoothly, continuously process its goods, do its job? And the answer, of course, is obvious, isn't it? And next, we want to talk about this very important word, pull. All the bold printed words here, by the way, are very important, right? They are very important. So that's why I highlighted that, bold printed, right? So in short, this word, pull. Remember the teacher advice thing I was talking about? Normally, when we set up factory, we'll say, oh, okay, I'm producing shampoo, right? So I will first have an empty bottle, right? Next step, right? The machine will fill, right? Next step, the machine will cap, because that's different action, so we need different machines. Next step, machine will label, stick a label. What? Okay, let's just, of course, we are not P&G, right? So it's got to be much more complicated than that. But let's just simplify to these 3 steps, right? So a bottle, make the bottle available, maybe inspect that is clear for production, then fill, then cap, then label. Just simple 4 steps. When we talk about it this way, we are going from first step to last step, left to right, in a more incremental manner that eventually builds the product, right? And then we plan, how fast can we produce? And then we ship out. So from the lean operations perspective, this is called push. We as in the management, the manager, supervisors, manager, we plan the capacity. Oh, I can make 100,000 bottles a day in my production line. So I do that. Of course you will do that, right? Because to have a 100,000 production facility per day facility, it's obviously going to cost more than if you purchase or install a 10,000 unit per day production line. It is just basic market costing dynamics, right? So if you have put in a lot of money into this 100,000 units per day production line, would you purposely only produce 10,000 bottles per day? Of course not. It's not going to be feasible, right? It's not going to make your ROI nice to see. And that's the problem. So obviously you will tune to the maximum. That is the traditional way of pushing. If I can make $100,000 bottles a day, I do that because I can then recover my cost. So that is the problem. That's where lean teacher comes along and says, hey, you should sleep more, right? hey, you should look at pull, don't look at push. Okay, so literally, literally. So please look at pull, don't look at push. What is pull? Pull is customer demand. That's the keyword here, right? So it gels in very well with the earlier philosophical point. You should look at customer, right? If customer wants a lot, okay, then you ramp up your production, your actual production to 90,000 per day, 100,000 per day, and if need be, spill over, right, excess, right, you will outsource this production or activate your next production line, etc., etc. You ramp up the production when the customer demand is high. Okay. Now, I need you to think of customer demand not as a number, as if it won't change. You need to understand the word customer means wild animal, no control, unpredictable. Okay. So it is therefore an uncontrolled, unpredictable number that we are trying to arrest or handle or deal with, that we are trying to match. So customer wants your shampoo a lot this week or this month, but it will not be for 10 years or 100 years. Okay, so don't make that assumption. So customer demand for next 3 days, very high, ramp up production. Customer demand for next 3 days, very low. So tone down the production. In so doing, when you try to meet your supply with the pooled demand, not your planned production units. I plan for 100,000 units per day, but the demand is 10,000 units per day. Oh, well, I make first, I stock up the 90,000. But there's the problem, stock up cost, right? Expiring produced goods, new demand for different, or rather customer switches their preferences. They want different fragrance, they want variety, they don't want the old kind of goods. I mean, it's still within the expiry date, but they want something new. Don't you want something new, right? You have been using lavender all through your life. Won't you want to try something new, right? Wasabi taste. Right, so maybe it's the fickle-mindedness of the customer that the demand for that particular product, say lavender smell kind of shampoo, is fluctuating. So if you don't look at the pool, don't look at the demand, you just blindly out 100,000, you will, of course, produce waste. See, it comes in big roundabout circle again. So look at pool. Pool is super important. What is pool? Pool is be mindful of the customer's demand, then of course match your process to the customer's demand by also improving your smoothness of the flow. Okay, and finally, we want to talk about excellence. Finally, in the sense of the course scope, that means in our course, we don't want to keep talking about 100 different aspects that you have to look at, right? That's just too wild as a course. So, and more may not be good. So we will just look at these 5 points here. The 5th point, excellence. That we strive for perfection by continually removing successive layers of waste. That means keep the whole recipe or the principles here, run it as a for loop, run it as a sort of infinite loop, rather than, oh, I just need to do customer focus, then I do a inspection, right, and weed out all the waste in my process one time, then I make sure everything is smooth, then I look at customer demand, then I'll be good. That's not a one-off thing, says the lean teacher here. All right, the lean teacher, last point, excellence means, of course, excellence is very mature. I want to be the best that I can be, right? But how? Oh, well, excellence here means repeat, keep doing it. In Japanese term, there's this word called Kaizen, which we'll look at, right, in the future videos, lessons. Which is basically also saying the same thing, to repeat, right? I mean, the impact is less on repeat than I want to keep on doing this to improve myself, and therefore resulting in a repeat loop. But here the excellence here is repeat doing this all the time, keep doing this. Yeah. Okay. Next, we want to look at lean operations and Six Sigma. Lean operations supplies the customer with exactly what customer wants. Product design, right? When the customer wants it, time responsiveness, without the extra cost or unwanted feature. How many times have you bought items, whether it's electrical appliances, computer parts, bags, clothes, stationery, whatever it is, right? That you find that it has got a new feature, but then from there on you never use it. How many times have you encountered that situation? In car, for example, those driving cars, sometimes you discover a new feature, and then you will think, wow, great, right? I got this nice feature, and then you never use it. For example, I realized that in my car, I bought a second-hand car, and this car was cheap enough, so I really like it. And of course, there are a lot of electronics and features, right? So my previous car, my older car, was of course, the older generation before I bought this second-hand car. The previous car didn't have a lot of these electronic features and stuff. So hey, I got this very interesting. So I flip around. There's this eco mode, which helps you to save fuel. I say, wow, cool, it helps me to save fuel, increasing the mileage, right? But nothing is free. I always remember my personal free bonus principle for you: no free lunch, right? What do you mean by no free lunch? Well, in eco mode, it does attempt, right? It attempts to help you increase your mileage, being eco. I didn't know it's by gesture, right? So it is eco. So eco means you will step on the gas and it will try to throttle down a little bit. So when I need a boost to accelerate, perhaps to overtake, perhaps to avoid a problematic traffic situation, I don't get that acceleration. And that becomes a danger to myself because I thought the car will just do this. It didn't do it, right? So promptly I switch it off and never use it again. So that is the kind of waste, right? Obviously, it has included the extra few dollars of adding that feature, and then that eco mode is, I think, not cheap because it has to really control the engine and the fuel injection and everything, complicated in order to save fuel, right? So it must have done all those features in relationship to each other at extra cost that I don't use, and that becomes a waste to me. Now, if my feel of it, the extra eco mode, is also not used by many or majority customers, then it is actually a waste, right? Because your car could have been much more competitive without that feature than with. So that's what I'm trying to say. So here, the green ticks are the must learn points for you guys. Okay, you hear me? Right. Because when you keep talking about examples and lean and excellence, right, it's so virtual. Like, so what do I write? How am I being tested, right? Oh, you just want to be excellent. No. But here, you want to eliminate waste. That much is clear, right? Because we already talked about the sources of waste. Eliminate them. or reducing it as much as possible, or manage it. That means be conscious that the waste is being produced. Number two, reduce inventory and lead time. These are always the right things to say. Doing it is hard. Achieving it is difficult because it is also very sector or industry oriented. How do you reduce inventory? What is inventory in the first place, right? Are they essential? Are they critical? Lead times. These two aspects of measurements. One is visible inventory. The other one is not so visible, lead times. So reduce inventory, one tick. Reduce lead time, extra one tick. I should put them as two ticks. Seriously. Okay. Reduce inventory is the right thing to say in business school. Okay, I'm doing this in business school, so I have to say the right thing, right? But of course, I want to give you a bit of a real life perspective. COVID-19 shows the world that reducing inventory just in time, zero inventory, supply will ship to me just when I need it. That's a just in time concept, right? Will help me in my business, will remove the need for me to have a warehouse, will reduce my warehouse size if I still need a warehouse, right? Because I don't need to carry inventory. Supplier will always obediently, punctually, reliably give me the materials I need just when I need them. But COVID-19 shows the world that is not really true, right? Yeah, supplier might want to be on time, but they are delayed. Supplier might want to sell to you, deliver to you, but the ports have no workers. Bad, right? So COVID-19 it's another teacher, right? So it reminds the world that, hey, reduce inventory, not necessarily a good thing, right? So that is another discussion. But in general, right? In general, let's say you're working in a controlled environment within the country, your supply chains are all within the country. Where at least policy changes, regulations are not going to be exposed to changes in regulations and policies in other countries, then maybe it's possible to still think about reducing inventory. So reduce inventory, good thing. And of course, now under tariff war, well, we should still try to reduce inventory, although things have changed, because if other countries start to have tariffs, all right, because America is a big guy bullies the small guy bullies the smaller guys, then reducing inventory could mean that even if you have the money, other countries might not want to sell you, might be reluctant to sell you, might have a high tariff, all right, or whatever it is that eventually you are unable to buy. So, for example, for Singapore, right, if you think about rice, Singapore produces nothing. I should say Singapore has no natural resources, so it doesn't have rice production. What if we want to buy rice and there is a lot of tariffs, right? Export tariffs, or the countries don't sell us rice? It happened before, isn't it? The chicken, right? Fresh chicken sale, I think it's from Malaysia to Singapore. That was like at one point stopped, right? Because of supply chain issues, and Malaysia itself didn't have enough chicken, so they say stop, don't sell to Singapore, we'll sell to ourselves first. So of course we understand you have to take care of your own people, but then we also need chickens, right? So it just goes to show that you have the money, you have the demand, you don't mind paying you more, but people don't sell you. So we may have to have inventory, a bit contradicting to this green tick here. But wait, lean operations, right? So in peacetime, right, when those hiccups are resolved, it is still a good idea to think of reducing inventory. So I would still want to kind of make this relevant, even after COVID-19, even with the current trade war evolving, right? And we don't know the consequences and the reactions from other countries yet. Still, think about reducing inventory, right? So that should be our operating norm. Reducing lead time also very important. Lead time is invisible. Okay, lead time will lead to uh, time loss, and time is money. All right, time is money. So if you reduce lead time, then you will help the customer and yourself. So if you're the supplier, you reduce lead time, you get to do other transactions, right? So you don't have this so-called liability to fulfill the delivery. And as customer of course like lead times to be short, and that's important. Next, remove variability. So that can go into inventory, lead times, pay, bonuses, whatever it is. The idea is variability is bad for business. So when we say that, for example, trade war escalates, right? Donald Trump says, 25%. Sorry, 45%. What? 125%. No, 145%. Sorry, 3,000% every day, right? So if you do that, then that is the human generated kind of variability. Now, I'm not commenting on what Donald Trump did. I'm saying he did this, right? That's a fact. He did this. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm saying from the lean operations perspective, that is generating variability. So if we look at it from the green tick perspective, that's counter the removing of variability, which means bad for business, right? Bad for the supply chain. When you reduce variability to zero in the extreme, it becomes completely predictable, correct or not? For example, if every day you eat chicken rice, the next time I go out with you, I don't even ask you chicken rice, 2 chicken wings, because I know you don't have variability in your lunch. You always eat 2 chickens, kind of chicken, 2 chicken wings, chicken rice, if, for example. So if you don't have variability, you become completely predictable. And if I were to go out lunch with you, ordering lunch is super efficient because I also don't have variability. I always eat char siu rice. So I say 1 char siu rice, 1 chicken rice with 2 chicken wings. We just go and we just sit down. You don't have to talk to me. I know what you want. Right? So that's very predictable. Of course, if it is military setting, predictability is bad, right? So you want surprises. The counter to that is if we want to be doing business, we got to be friendly. And to be friendly is to be more predictable. In other words, don't spring surprises onto your business partners, right? So remove variability. Aim for it if you cannot, right? And then improve throughput, improve your ability to produce, improve your overall rate of production. Overall, I'm stressing. All right, overall. So you always have to imagine this this snake of production steps. All right, and each step requires machine and an operator, man, right? So machine, man, machine, and several of them. So if you just buy a super duper fast, efficient machine for one of the steps, that is not improving the throughput. That's just upgrading locally. It doesn't increase the overall production rate. Is that okay? All right. Yeah, so the idea here is to improve the overall production. So if I have $1 million, all right, if I don't follow improved production rate, I will be spending $1 million to upgrade the middle machine, maybe the slowest machine, I don't know, right? I pump in the whole $1 million and buy a super duper machine. Now is no longer bottleneck, right? Now I think it will be very good, but I'm not following the green tick here. I did not improve the overall throughput. So how do I do that? How should I follow the green tick here? I should use the $1 million to upgrade all the machines. Instead of upgrading the center machine from 100 units to 10,000 units per hour, many times more, right? On a single machine, I should be upgrading all the machines to maybe 50% more. Okay, every machine increases the capacity by 50%. Not much compared to 10 times more. But then overall throughput would have been lifted by 50%. That is the idea, right? That is the idea. Clear? All right. So these 4 ticks basically summarize the key things that lean operations is trying to teach us, basically. Right? So we talked about lead times, high costs. These are the issues in supply chain, right? Where are the problems? Long lead times, high cost, unacceptable quality level. So basically damaged goods, defects. Right? Low customer, that's also a defect. Because customer satisfaction basically is in the service line, for example, right? Whether you are a doctor in the clinic or hair salon doing the hair, these are all services. And customer satisfaction will be the end result, right? So if you have low customer satisfaction, you basically have damaged goods or little bit damaged goods. Right? So all these are visible because you will hear complaints, you will hear defect return forms being sent back to you. You can see high costs in P&L. You can observe and measure long lead times. And the deeper causes we are talking about, 3 things, right? At least in this course, you want to talk about these 3 things. Wastage, variability, and lack of ability to adapt, called inflexibility. Inflexibility. Okay, so wastage, variability, inflexibility. We already we talked about some of these, right? So we will emphasize this a bit more in subsequent lessons. What are the solutions? Well, sometimes we cannot solve all of them, but it should help improve the situation. Implement lean operations. Follow what lean teacher is trying to say, right? That's the idea here. Okay, lean and Six Sigma, right? Six Sigma, you might have heard, is the theory about quality. So it's a very numerically oriented, calculation oriented theory to actually measure quality, because we don't just say, oh, this looks good, must be having high quality. This looks bad, must be having poor. Well, we cannot go by subjective assessment, because look by visual inspection is just one way, one data source, right? The actual measurements need to be done statistically. And the sigma here, for those of you who recall your basic statistics, is the population standard deviation. It measures the amount of deviations from the mean, the average. The larger the sigma, the more fluctuations, deviations from away from the mean. The mean is the specification. So if I have a table of 1 meter, all right, and my sigma is large, means if I produce 100 tables, some of them, 50 of them will be 1 meter, 10 of them 12 meters, another 10 of them 9 meters, and so on and so forth. What did I say? 1.2 meters, sorry, 1 meter, right? 1.2 meters, 0.9 meters, and then keep fluctuating. And you can imagine the rather laughable situation when you, tables coming out from your factory cannot align, on the delivery truck with a 1 meter spacing. Cannot, because some are protruding, some are like short, and then jutting around as the truck is being driven. So that's a very laughable situation, and of course it leads to low customer satisfaction, right? Imagine buying from IKEA. The specification says 2 meters high, right? 1 meters wide, your bookshelf. When you put it up, it's 1.5 meters high and 1.5 meters wide. And you cannot fit in because you have done your furniture arrangement, right? So that's ridiculous, isn't it? And you wouldn't expect that of IKEA. So for IKEA, if you actually measure, it's like very exact. And remember, it's wood. Wood is very easily subjected to deformities, sometimes as much as 1 millimeter, because unlike steel and iron, it expands and contracts. But then for IKEA, very high quality in that sense. So we kind of, in lean, we don't talk about nice to see. We don't talk about niceness, subjective niceness as quality. We look at meeting the specs. Did you meet the specs? If if you if you